Thanks for tuning in to Tapped In. If you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed on the mats, come find your direction in our DFM Coaching BJJ School community. Now, let's get started.
Welcome to Tapped In. My name is David Figueroa Martinez of DFM Coaching, and today we're going to be discussing my biggest pivots in Jiu-Jitsu. These are not going to be concepts necessarily or technique specific to what occurs on the mat. They were decisions that I made over the course of my journey that kind of cemented big life lessons and big, maybe opportunities. I listened to this podcast called The Pivot, which has, I think it's 4 former NFL players. And they discuss and have interviews with random people discussing the most random topics, sometimes heartfelt, sometimes maybe a little political, but I don't think they get all that political. And it's really just people's lives and the things that they have endured or crossed over or the successes they've had. And at the end of the show, they ask them, what is your biggest pivot? And so it got me thinking about my own jiu-jitsu journey and how it hasn't always been smooth. And I never want to give people the impression that your journey in jiu-jitsu is going to be smooth. It's really not. And if you think the on-the-mat stuff is rough, the off-the-mat stuff involved in jiu-jitsu can also get really complicated and messy. So for me, my biggest pivot, the one that comes to mind right off the bat, is me just even trying jiu-jitsu. I did it at UC San Diego. They had a rec class, no gi. I jumped into that. It was the first time I had done a sport barefoot, which is alien to me, felt weird. I didn't quite feel right, but I fell in love with this. I fell in love with this puzzle. I'm also someone who doesn't necessarily like having his personal space invaded. Like, I'm not a big hugger. I'm not a big, really close physical with people. And this art kind of tramples all those weird hesitation and weird decisions and feelings that I have about that type of thing. I'm also a little bit of a germaphobe, so I don't know how I'm still doing this, to be honest with you. I remember when I quit teaching kids, I used to get sick like every other month. It felt like once a month, every other month. And the first thing I noticed about not teaching kids was that my health got better. And I loved teaching kids, but the health part alone was a big plus of not having to handle or having to deal with. Now I get sick like a normal person every couple of months, every like twice a year, 3 times a year, something like that. But I swear to you, I was getting sick so much with kids. Kids are gross. So I jumped into doing jiu-jitsu. It was very foreign to me. I understood grappling. I understood wrestling around people. I didn't understand the complexity of the puzzle that jiu-jitsu ended up being for me. And it was a moment of seeing that it can quiet my mind and I can see or experience moments where I didn't have to think about a bunch of scenarios and a bunch of things that my mind tends to do. And I could just be in the moment and love every minute of that. Specifically nowadays when we have phones and electronic, social media, jiu-jitsu really does disconnect me from everything else, and it forces me to focus in this one thing. I work behind a desk, so the internet's there. I'm off. I got the phone. That moment or that hour and a half really does give me peace of mind and disconnection that I haven't been able to find anywhere else. So just getting into jiu-jitsu was a massive win for me. I started getting fit, started losing weight, the bad weight, I should say. And I started just feeling better about myself. The confidence went up. The opinion of myself changed. It got better. I started looking at myself differently. I didn't accept certain things from people. Now I didn't, like at 45, being in jiu-jitsu for 15 years, if I have to tell somebody something, I tell them. I don't accept being disrespected, but I also understand that the black belt isn't going to save me from everything. So I pick and choose what those battles are going to look like. Opposed to when I was younger, I just kind of like let everything slide. So that was my first pivot. Second would be when I got an ultimatum at my first Jiu-Jitsu academy. I wasn't feeling great about some of the instruction or some of the things that were going on at the academy. I felt like certain things could be done a little differently. Without getting into specifics, it didn't vibe with what I wanted from a gym. And what happens is when you start jiu-jitsu, you don't have any expectations. You really don't know what it could be or what it should be. So you just kind of go into it and you accept everything that it is because you think, oh, this is just the way it is. Kind of like if you had your first relationship. If you don't have any models to base that on, your first relationship, you get into it and you just kind of assume, oh, we're just going to argue. We're going to do this or that. And you don't have a good reference point, specifically if maybe the home life didn't have a good example for that. So you don't know what else to expect. You just accept what happens. Even if you down deep, you know that it's not quite right for you. You just assume all relationships are like this. And they're not. All gyms are not the same. And some gyms are really put together aesthetically and have issues behind closed doors or within the instructor period or phase. And then other gyms maybe don't have the aesthetically pleasing situations in mind. Like they don't have the greatest mats. They don't have the greatest gym. But the culture is beautiful and it's fantastic and it's supportive. So I got to a spot where I had been training for a little bit. I kind of had a somewhat of an understanding what I wanted and didn't want. And I started seeing some things about the gym that didn't quite fit with me. So I started to feel like maybe I should go somewhere else. There was a couple people who had already left and I went back and forth. I was talking to a friend of mine and he said, dude, there's a jiu-jitsu gym in any direction in San Diego. Don't feel like you need to sit in this one, accept everything that you don't like simply because you think you can't find a home. You're going to find a spot that is more what you want. You just have to go visit it and go around and try different spots. So he was like, do it. You don't have to tell the instructor. And I felt a little weird about not doing it. So I was getting to the point where I was really debating whether I should or shouldn't. And I was leaning more towards should. So I explained that to my instructor. My instructor was not necessarily happy about it. In some ways, I understand that. I don't know. Part of me does, part of me doesn't. But then we had a conversation face to face and in essence told me that he was worried that I was going to taint the other students, which is not something that I was going to do. It's not how I operate. And he said, you're either here or you're not. So I need you to make a decision. And that ultimatum didn't feel well with me. I don't do well with ultimatums. And so I turned in my key, got my shit, and I left. And it was the best thing at the time for me. It forced me to find a new home. It forced me to look at things that I liked and didn't like about a gym. I checked out a few spots, and I ended up at Gracie San Diego, which will lead to the next pivot. But I ended up at Gracie San Diego, and I absolutely loved aspects of it right away. It was a little bit more traditional. I came from a gym that was more American, and there was no bowing in and bowing out. Didn't care what key color you liked. It's weird because I sort of like that now more than before, but I still like some of the traditional aspects. So I'm a bundle of contradictory emotions when it comes to that. But that's a topic for another day. So I got there and I started learning so much jiu-jitsu. The quality of jiu-jitsu was higher there. There was high-level competitors there. There was great instruction. There was great training. It was a bigger space. There was 2 mat spaces. There were 2 locker rooms, 2 shower for the men and the women. So it was a more well put together space than what I came from. And there were far more instructors and way more training partners to roll with. Everything from white to black belt and several black belts at that. And so for my development, it was a great decision. And it was the first time I got to teach my own classes. As I developed, I got purple, brown, and black from that instructor. And I got to really take on more of a leadership role with time. Once I got to purple, I started teaching my own classes. 3 to 7-year-olds, I started doing, I think at brown belt, I started doing like a Sunday lab class for the white and blue belts. I started really coming into my own and starting to get more comfortable teaching and comfortable being the center of attention, which has never been something that I gravitate to. I'm an introvert. I don't like the scenarios where I'm the focus. But with jiu-jitsu, I fell in love with teaching. I fell in love with helping people and getting people to get better and providing answers for people. So that was a massive pivot for me. And unfortunately, so was leaving. I got to a point where the relationship there kind of soured, and the gentleman was very specific about how I wanted certain things, and I had a view of things that should be different, and we would get into it about what I was posting online, and we would get into it if I wanted to cross train or if I wanted to go to a seminar at another gym. There was a lot of controlling aspects of that space that I did not like, and unfortunately didn't see until I was a couple of years in. When you're lower on the belt system, maybe you don't see a lot because you're not entrusted with certain responsibilities and you don't have a close working relationship with the instructor staff. So there were things that I didn't see until later. And then once you get to that point, you have invested so much, both physically, emotionally. Your ties have gotten deeper there. You have friends, people that you absolutely love being around and training with. And you have to decide at some point whether that's going to be enough to stay or if the relationship that is being tainted by some of the toxic element is going to push you away. And at the time, I felt like it wasn't going to be ultimately good for me. I started avoiding my instructor. I would go train on days that he wasn't there. I'd go train in the morning knowing that he wouldn't be there. I would go train at La Mesa. I was part of the gym. I taught my classes. I put my time in, but I was not around my instructor very often. And it was a lot of, because of the conversations that we had, they didn't fall well on me. They didn't feel well. They didn't sit in my spirit well. And I remember some happening with a student because he didn't treat people very well. And he would sometimes call people out in a really disrespectful way, embarrass people sometimes. He was short. The way he did business with instructors was really, really iffy. He sometimes, if a class was getting popular, he would kind of undercut that class if he wasn't the instructor and wanting people to come to his class. So it was a really weird environment in that sense. And I got to a point where I wanted to do more, but I was at odds. And because I was at odds, I was having certain things maybe not given to me or being entrusted with certain things. I was no longer in the inner circle, which at that point was fine by me. And one day I heard he disrespected someone publicly, and I said, I've had enough. So I went my own way, and I bet on myself. And that led me to the next pivot, which is kind of overlapping with that one, which was understanding that I wasn't just an employee. I was an intellectual property. I was something unique. All of us are unique. Every instructor has their own approach. Every instructor has their own experiences that they can levy and leverage into coaching positions and coaching jobs. And for me, finally understanding that I was more than just an employee on the books that taught classes, and that I actually had something that I could leverage for income or leverage for a spot somewhere to teach or to be a voice in the community, things changed for me. Part of it was deciding that I didn't want to be in that space and that the message that I was receiving in that space was different than the one that I was trying to put out. But it put me in a space where I wanted to grow and I wanted to be more of a part in the community and not just that one gym. So once I left, I started teaching regularly at Gracie La Mesa, and then another spot opened up at Five Peaks, and then Sunny Dojo came into the circle, and I'm teaching at 3 different gyms now. I'm running a school community. I'm running social media. I have this podcast. I have a Substack blog, and all of that is part from understanding that we all have a certain level of intellectual property that is very unique to us and can bring about a voice. And that voice is sometimes respected and needed to be heard from. But if I had never made that pivot in understanding that who I was can provide some help to other people, I would have stayed in that same space. I would have never moved away. I would have never grown out of that fishbowl, done the things that I'm doing right now. I don't know if this podcast would have ever become a thing. I think I would have been too shut in by that person and the culture that he had created that I don't think I would have done this. And I don't think I would have felt comfortable doing it. I used to get into it with what I was posting, and that would put me at odds and make me doubt everything that I posted because I had to put it through a lens of someone else, which then didn't sound like me. And so these are my biggest pivots, biggest decisions, and that really cultivated who I am now, where I've gone and I've been able to grow into. You're going to have these pivots somewhere along your journey. You may never run a blog, you may never do a podcast, but your ability to be yourself and enrich the community or the gym that you're at is very unique to you. And you're going to make some decisions from time to time that are going to lead you down a path. Sometimes that path leads you away from jiu-jitsu completely, or it leads you away from jiu-jitsu for a certain time or period. It doesn't mean that it was a bad decision. It's just sometimes you got to make a pivot, and you won't know its value or its importance until maybe months, years later. And then you look back and it's like, all right, that was big for me. I've been able to do this, this, and this. So look at your own journeys. Look at what you're doing. Listen to your spirit. Listen to what feels good or okay with you. Sometimes the space you're in isn't it. And sometimes you're going to have to find a new space. And sometimes your pivot's going to be smaller, or maybe it's going to be off the mats or whatever. And that's okay. But these were my biggest pivots, biggest decisions that I made. There was a bunch of other smaller ones along the way, but these ones came to mind. If you have any questions about jiu-jitsu or anything else, please hit me up. dfm.2099 on Instagram and Threads. Also, if you like the podcast, please like, share, subscribe, rate it. All that stuff helps us out quite a bit. It's growing and I'm super happy. Until next time, thank you so much.